Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name's Adam Scrimshaw. Actually, the first of this week's editions. On today's show, I'm bringing back Liam MacKinnon. The Sens crash out, podcast went well the first time, so I'm having him back to talk Sens, the NHL season at the break, trade deadline, and some various rumors, thoughts on that. And then in the second half of the pod, we're going to do an Olympic preview for the men's hockey. Do we think Canada can repeat the Four Nations success? What do we make of the teams that weren't in the Four Nations face-off? Making fun of Bill Guerin because that's fun for all the family, and just generally shooting the shit as we are in Olympic season. We are recording this on Tuesday. The Olympic men's tournament will be starting as people are listening to this on the Wednesday that it comes out. Canada doesn't play till Thursday. Liam MacKinnon,
Evan,
how are you?
It's good to be back on the pod talking hockey. I need to get a few things off my chest before we get into Sens talk and Olympics, our Olympics preview. Look, we talked about football in the last episode.
I wasn't gonna bring it up, but not the best day for you on Sunday.
Well, we did win against the Broncos, so at least we beat Jared Stidham in a snowball fight. But that was glass half full. That was one of the least painful championship losses I'll probably ever experience. The Patriots have a really good foundation to build on. There's one more thing, Evan, I need to get off my chest, however. I couldn't help but feel a little bit crabby about the state of music after watching that halftime show. Cogent business case. That is not what I'm lamenting. But I'll admit, to console myself, I did watch that streak of 2005 to 2010 Super Bowl halftime shows featuring McCartney, the Stones, the Who, Springsteen and the E Street Band, Prince, Tom Petty, to reminisce on how good those Super Bowl halftime shows were. I very much doubt, Evan, that Bad Bunny will be part of the music consciousness 50 years from now. But that is the extent to which I will let my crusty old self come out on this episode as far as music.
The Tom Petty Super Bowl halftime show has been just completely forgotten to history, which is remarkable because it was, I think, one of the better of that run. And I mean, I just love Tom Petty. That was Tom Petty was one of the celebrity deaths that fucked with me the most. There's a bunch coming. You literally named Springsteen and McCartney, and those are both going to hit fucking gut punches when that happens. But man, I miss Tom Petty. God, he was good. I just want to listen to Tom Petty instead of recording this podcast.
I echo that. I miss him a lot too.
Oh, well, the Ottawa Senators were missing, but now seem to have back some goaltending. What a concept! When we get some saves, the team doesn't suck.
Yes, I think the Sens.
So I want to before you continue, I want to set the stage. Okay, so we record the night of the Nashville game. I watched the first two periods of the game. We're flying. I think, okay, I put something else on for the third period. You then text me after we fucking collapsed in the third. I ended up watching the third period afterwards, obviously. But you end up texting me, and I'm just like, oh my God, this team's done. It's over. I am at my lowest point with this team. Do you remember what we did fairly shortly thereafter?
After the Nashville game?
Yep.
What we discussed?
No, what the Sens then did. Colorado and Vegas.
Back
to back fucking ass whoopings. And there has never been a more we're so over. It's so over, we're so back than that 3-game stretch of the Ottawa Senators. What is this team?
So I'll just put an asterisk in there in that analysis because again, that game against the Preds was like entirely winnable, right? They dominated, they carried the play, and then they beat themselves in the third period. I wouldn't, lay the blame on the goaltending that game, but it was just another recurring theme of a game where the Sens were the far better team and couldn't pull out with any points. Yeah, this has been a very encouraging stretch of hockey. It needed to happen. We now have a little bit of life, Evan. We are not 2 or 3 points out like I wanted. I think we discussed that margin when we last spoke about hockey on your pod. But look, the Ottawa Senators are 6 points out now after going 8-3, 8-2-3, or 8-3-2 in the last 13. They've won five of the last six. They've gotten 920 save percentage and I think each of the last four games. So finally, the metrics are starting to show that. Sorry, finally, people are the doubts about the metrics are fading a little bit. This team is legitimately good, and it really only needed a couple saves.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, this team could have been even more successful. We could have beat Carolina the second time. I did completely blank the first Carolina game, which did happen between the Nashville game and the Vegas win. But like, the team looks good. The team is beating the teams it's supposed to beat. Would you have liked to have gotten one of those Carolina games, or at the very least the Nashville game? Yeah, but at the end of the day, we've got Detroit and Toronto right after the break. Those are easily winnable games. The Leafs are going to trick themselves into thinking they can contend because they went on a little bit of a run out west against two bad teams in Vancouver and Calgary, and then Edmonton team that very obviously their two best players were just more focused on getting in and out of that game without getting hurt than they were doing anything in that game. So I think there is an opening for us. And I think at the end of the day, like I've seen people talk about like, oh, the distance we're out of the playoffs. Like we would need a Hamburglar-esque run. And it's like, no. That team was mediocre, dragged forward by Erik Karlsson, and mostly crap. That got one of the most electric goaltending runs of all time to win to squeak into the playoffs. This team's legitimately just good. I think it was the TSN rankings that had us, I think, as the eighth best team. Yeah, and the best Canadian team, despite the fact that we're not in a playoff spot and aren't in the playoff spot, and there are two teams in the playoffs. Like, we are a clearly good team. I think it was Money Puck had us as ninth in overall Stanley Cup odds. Like, because if this team gets in, which is a huge question, but if this team gets in, we're gonna be we're a wagon, and that's the kind of situation where in hockey, a notoriously streaky sport, with Allmark back, and we'll talk about him specifically, like, there's every reason to think that it's actually worth getting for this, because sometimes I'm like, does it really matter? Like, okay, great, you're the second wild card, you're just going to go get steamrolled. Like, the Capitals of 2 years ago, the team that got swept by the Rangers, like, was that good for them to get in? Not really. Didn't really end up changing anything for them. But their dynasty, about who they were as a team, they had no chance, and they knew they had no chance. The Sens, they get in as one seed. You tell me we can't beat the Lightning, a team that's crapped out of the playoffs most years, the Hurricanes, a team that, frankly, we outplayed. We outplayed fairly recently. I know we lost the game, but we massively outplayed them. Like, I think this team is legitimately good. I'm legitimately excited to see what they do. And frankly, I kind of think we just have to, I'm really excited about this team. Like, I really think if they go on a run, like, am I crazy for being optimistic about not just getting in, but like the chance of going deep if we do?
Oh, I just hope we get in because Evan, I will guarantee you this, and this is number one on the list of obvious observations. No team in the East right now would prefer to face the number one ranked defense, a top 10 ranked offense, a top 10 ranked power play, a number one ranked face-off team, a post-Olympics Brady Tkachuk and Jake Sanderson, and Stutzla for that matter. Nobody wants to face a team that obviously by then, if they make it, will have played very, very well to get in. Um, I think Ottawa can at least win a round if they get in, maybe even two. They're going to be a redoubtable team.
What have you seen from Walmart recently? Because I've been impressed, and it's obviously been limited performances. I think the sort of caution about throwing him in too much has been smart. Um, I goaltending is such a voodoo science that it feels hard to sort of glean anything from 2 or 3 games. But what have you seen so far? What do we make of the sort of like basically, do we think we've got a guy? Like, do we think that there's a chance that we can get not even 920, not even 910? Do you think you can get 905 goaltending from him the rest of the season? Because I think if that happens, I think we're decidedly in the playoffs. What's the stat? We're like 22 3 and 2 if we have like 885 goaltending. Like the bar for what this team needs to win is it's in hell. Like, do we think we can get a base level of competence out of Olmark?
Yeah, so these are two different topics, right? I think the Sens are a redoubtable opponent if they make the cut. I'm still a little bit pessimistic, Evan, about our chances of making it, and I think really so much depends on Linus Ullmark's performance and availability, I will say, right? Because he comes back, plays 2 games to the level that we expect and above. I think that New Jersey game was awe-inspiring. I think the Pittsburgh game, he did his job. And then, he comes down with the flu and can't play. So his availability is a cause for great concern. From my vantage point, I don't think I can trust James Reimer to go on, the kind of run we need to make the playoffs at this point, Evan. So that is where I'm a little bit more pessimistic, and I wonder how the Sens view their goaltending situation heading into the trade deadline. But 885, I think it's a 23-2-1 record. I don't know. I don't have any comparables here, but that has to be first or second in the league as far as how good this team is with very poor goaltending.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even come up with a comp for a team that has been this bad and like this good at everything else and this bad in that. Like, because there's always a conversation of, is your goaltending a product of bad defense and how much do you blame it? It's like, you can't do that with this team. This team is literally first by every defensive metric. Expected goals allowed. Like, Travis Green plays a very disciplined, solid style of hockey. Our defense is playing it. Our forwards get back. Like, we play a style of hockey that is extremely good at, reducing high danger chances. Like, we're first in that. Like, it's so stark with this team because it almost feels like there isn't much to talk about. There is in reality quite a lot to talk about, but like, it really does just feel like if we get a save, we win. Do you think, pivoting to the trade deadline, do we think there's any universe in which they go get another option, or do you think they're just going to ride Ullmark and Reimer to the end and hope that availability is there?
No, I think realistically, in a year that you don't own your first round pick, or at least not as of today, you need to add a little bit of insurance at the goaltending position, Evan. I don't think that you can trust that either Allmark or Reimer can be available and or good enough from here on out. I think you need to add that other goalie. I don't think you can justify giving Levi Marilyn another game. I will just stop here for a few moments just to acknowledge that we were both wrong, Evan, when we predicted. I think you said Marilyn, I said Shepherd as far as who should play the second leg of that back-to-back against the Vegas Golden Knights. It ended up being Mads Sogard, and he was terrific. That being said, I'm not. I'm still not on the Sogard wagon. So I think yeah, you need to add some depth at that position. I think the Sens are obviously very aggressive in pursuit of impact players with term, both on defense and up front. And I know we wanted to discuss this a little bit, but I believe you listened to the Elliot Friedman bit he did on the 32 Thoughts podcast, like I did.
Yeah, so Elliot was saying he thinks in that sort of classic Elliot, I know more than I'm saying, but I need to, protect my sources. And I haven't really talked to anybody in Ottawa recently because I've already annoyed them enough. So, haven't confirmed anything. This was the Tuesday before. So this was last Tuesday. Wow, feels like that was a lot longer than a week ago. But you know, we won on Thursday, so I don't think this analysis will be fundamentally changed. He thinks the Sens might do something bold and ambitious. I don't think Mackenzie Weegar would qualify as bold, given that everyone on Sens Twitter and in the Sens ecosystem has been sort of talking about Mackenzie Weegar to Ottawa since the moment that Mackenzie Weegar was included in Huberdeau for Kachuk. Like, you have a theory. I'm going to let you express what that theory is. I do think the Sens should be bold. We don't have the first round pick this year. And it's not that this team is old by any means, but this team is this team has done enough to prove that you need to go all in for that. Not all in, obviously. I'm not saying trade the future first for, unnecessarily. I'm not saying, do something completely insane, but this is a team that has proven that under this coach and with this system to be one of the best teams in the league outside of goaltending. I absolutely think boldness is justified here. And I do think, we need to be real about what Ottawa is as a market. And I think there are a few names. I'm going to let you lead with the one that you came to me with. I do think there are some names that, might be good buy lows in a, understandable sort of who might be available for reasons, but are still good players.
Yeah, so there are two criteria, right? If we're sorting through impact players that are available right now, there are two criteria. A, the acquisition cost must not be prohibitive. Again, the Sens don't own a first round pick and they don't have an awful lot of prospects to ship out. And B, and this is the Ottawa tax, the player must have a genuine desire to play in Ottawa, at least for the next couple years. Otherwise, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So the player I've been thinking about a lot is a certain Elias Pettersson out of Vancouver. Now, I get his name is being discussed in the trade rumors, and look, the player that Steve Stais could end up acquiring is, I mean, in all likelihood, someone we haven't even thought about. But here's why Elias Pettersson makes sense. Well, first of all, I think the immediate reaction would be, well, he's a center. The centers have a glut. I think obviously you would need to deal a center back to Vancouver, but I think Pettersson's versatile enough that he can play the wing. More importantly, though, you add one of the best shooters in the league, and this is a verifiable fact. Elias Pettersson has one of the best wrist, snap, and one-time shots in the NHL. He's scored 40 goals before. He's in a terrible environment. His value is tanked. So I don't think that makes, his acquisition cost I think that his acquisition cost is not prohibitive, in fact, at this point, especially if we're dealing one of our, three centers, which obviously isn't going to be Stutzla. But more importantly, you add a shooter, right? And you give Stutzla that finisher, and Stutzla elevates to, a 90-point floor. The gamble, of course, and this is priced into the transaction if it happens, is, Pedersen's paid $11.6 million or whatever it is. And you're probably going to accept that he's going to be overcompensated a little bit. But, the cap's going up and you kind of just view it as the Ottawa tax. I think it makes sense because of the limited amount of demand around him right now. So I'm curious about your thoughts, Evan. In the world of buy lows, where does Elias Pettersson rank for you?
I mean, it depends on what you want this team to be, right? And I don't think it can work out so badly that this team that it is a sort of like crippling mistake for the team. I don't think it could be something where it stops us being a playoff team. I think he is, because the thing is, the problem with Vancouver, and a lot of people are going to say, oh, but Vancouver's never been a reliable playoff team. Vancouver has made like 12 horrible decisions. Their decor outside of, well, they've now traded Quinn Hughes, but even when it was like Quinn Hughes, Phil Peronic, and a bunch of people that should not be playing. Like, should be six defensemen at best. We have the structure around Pettersson to make it worthwhile, to make it interesting, to make him competent, to make to hide his flaws and to accentuate his strengths. And I think with the cap going up, I mean, it's not like we are allocating our cap the world's most efficiently right now. We have most everybody tied down on long-term deals. We're going to have to resign Batherson, but like Jensen's an expiring, Perron's an expiring. That is $8 million in cap right there. Like with the cap increase, we have young defensemen coming up. Yak is going to presumably be with the NHL team next year on an ELC. Like, I don't think it's, and then by the time that you have to start to extend the RFA defenseman, we're in a good position. I think it's every reason to think about him. I look, obviously the team's got to be confident that he's not gonna pout. And the last guy and I would like to know what the hell happened with JT Miller, but the counterpoint is it's not exactly like the Rangers getting JT Miller, elevated them. And so I do wonder how much of the Pettersson is lazy. Pettersson doesn't care about winning. Pettersson's, just here to sign his big contract and, screw off narrative is just Vancouver media falling into one, lazy stereotypes about Swedish players and European players in general, and two, the fact that JT Miller seems to have an incredibly good PR team around him, which, given the quality of player JT Miller is, I'm confused about. But
And that's kind of what I was trying to illustrate too. Like when you think about all the big names that have been acquired by Ottawa in recent memory, going back to Danny Heatley, Bobby Ryan, Matt Duchene, there have been some problems around those people, and I think the Sens just have to accept that that's kind of the landscape in the NHL. Like you are going to have to buy low for high profile names and hope that they can come back to their highest form. And I think Pettersson is a reasonable gamble in that respect, but especially because you are getting that premier shooter to play on Stutzla's wing, who has that 40 goal pedigree. But look, he in saying that this is a player who obviously controls his own destiny. He does have a no trade clause, and the reason I say it's feasible is because he's used to a Canadian market. I think Sens have had a lot of success with Swedes. I think people like Alfredson could make the case that Pettersson would like it here. Um, I don't want to stray too much, but that's a name that I would be very interested in. And that's one of the names I thought about when I was listening to Elliot Friedman um, ruminate around this. He did say, and this I want this on the record, his baseball analogy was great, right? He talked about the 2015 Toronto Blue Jays, who were one game above 500, right? No guarantee to make the playoffs, far from it. But he was essentially saying, I predict the Sens will act as confidently and as boldly as Alex Anthopoulos in 2015. And obviously, that's a lot to be intrigued about.
Yeah, no, it's Elliot's a weird one, and the fact that the Leafs kind of just end up being talked about on 32 Thoughts whether they're going to do anything or not. Ottawa, not really. Like usually, if we're being brought up, there's a reason for it, and that reason will become clear sort of soonish. I think the other advantage to Pedersen is and the case for anybody with significant long term contract. I was going to say long term, and then that sentence structure just broke me. Is that contract's not going to look nearly as bad when we get an actually good free agent, like an actually good free agent class with some high end names that start to get signed, because last year's free agency was just bad. There just wasn't any names, right? And Tavares, who theoretically could have signed for a lot of money had he left Toronto, he wanted to stay and took a sweetheart deal. Marner left, but it seems like Marner had that handshake with Vegas a long time back. And so you didn't really have any real star names in free agency, which didn't really cause any crazy contracts. Like Kaprizov's extension is wild. We'll see what Quinn Hughes maybe gets in an extension. But we don't know what these teams that miss out that were planning for McDavid were planning for, Quinn Hughes next summer, not this summer. We're going to start to see what happens if some of these guys keep extending and keep sort of taking themselves to the market. A lot of teams are going to have a lot of money to sign bad contracts. And suddenly, Pedersen, an overpay at the time it was signed, and a contract that hasn't aged the best, you absolutely could and frankly probably will see whoever the next team that has him get a lot better out of him. Because I do think people are underestimating, because they're on the West Coast and because a lot of the Western Canadian sports media focuses on Edmonton for understandable reasons, the Canucks are probably the most incompetent, toxically run Canadian franchise. They're a mess. And they don't get talked about like a mess in the way that they should nationally. And I think Pedersen is an immaculate buy low. And frankly, I don't have a lot of faith in that management group to get the best they can out of him, which makes me think that we can steal him for, expiring contracts, middling prospects, and, I just don't think it's going to take that much to get him. Because frankly, the Canucks are incompetent and bad at this. And if they weren't so bad at this, maybe a very good, productive player who was very, very good would be still being productive. You have any other names that you think it could be? Was there anyone else that really immediately jumped out at you?
Well, of course, we need to talk about Mackenzie Weegar. I think that's the name being discussed around town here. I think that one's realistic. The Sens need an upgrade on Nick Jensen. There is no doubt about that. Uyghur is someone who's obviously he's in that list of buy lows around the league. His metrics have tanked this year. His value has decreased. He's going to be paid $6.25 million, which is not the problem. The AAV isn't. It's the term. I think until he's 37. So that one makes sense if the Sens can go to Calgary and say, with the kind of leverage that, we just saw in the Panarin deal, or when the Sens dealt Tarasenko to Florida, or when Marchand was dealt to Florida last year. if Ottawa happens to be one of the only or the only destination that Uyghur would accept a trade to, then that makes sense. I wouldn't overpay, but this is someone who can obviously give you 2 or 3 more seasons of really solid top four hockey and play alongside Thomas Shabbat. And I think this defense becomes, if it wasn't airtight before, becomes completely airtight. And I think that the Sens will be a force to be reckoned with once again come playoff time with a defense that looks like Sanderson, Zub, Shabbat, Uyghur, and Clevin and Spence. Are you kidding me? That's that's gold.
Yeah, no, and I think for the playoffs, you would I'd have no problem with Yak being our eighth defenseman in that situation. Yeah, I mean Jensen's expiring contract as a sort of get out of jail free card for this, and third that can become a second if we win 2 rounds. I don't know that Calgary's getting anything better than that.
Yeah, probably not, which is why I think it would be unwise for them to trade Uyghur at this point. I think you can reasonably bank on a better season from him next year and then trade him at the next deadline. So
yeah, but that's not how any of these teams think. That's not how anybody in this sport thinks. Should it be how this sport works? Yes. But that's not how the sport works. And I'm flabbergasted because when you have term, and I guess when it's older guys, I vaguely understand, if he gets injured, we're not even going to get that. But with guys with term, it's you can just ride this out. Just wait. See if he's good. If he's good if he's good for 2 months, trade him in December, you'll get a first. But no, we need to do something because the fan base is yelling at us and we just need to do something.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing with Uyghur is that this season is probably an anomaly, right? He's been legitimately one of the best defensemen analytically and even with pure point statistics over the last 3 or 4 seasons. And then you add to the fact you add that he's a right shot defenseman as well. So no, I think the acquisition cost should be a lot higher than probably what it's going to be at the deadline for Mackenzie Weegar. And if the Sens can swing it without, and I want to insist on this, trading Carter Yakimchuk, I'm down.
Yeah, because it's a non-starter. That there's no way on earth we would. No, I didn't even feel the need to bring that up because there's just no universe in which Teos is stupid enough to do that.
I wanted to address it because there is some discussion around. I mean, I've seen people online talk about, the prospect of trading Yakimchuk for an upgrade like Weegar. That just makes no sense at this point.
It's people not understanding that you are trading for contracts, not trading for theoretical concepts of a player, and Yak on an ELC and then on with control for years after that is a far more valuable asset than a declining Mackenzie Weegar. Here's my last. We'll do a full trade deadline preview when the team's back. There are 6 games before so there's 2 games in the Eastern Conference in the Atlantic Division, very important games for us. Then we go on an 8-game road trip, or 4-game Western road trip. I can't speak. 8 points theoretically available for us on the road trip. That's why I was thinking about 8. So of the 12 available points, here are our games: home to Detroit, at the Leafs, and then at Edmonton, Calgary, Seattle, and Vancouver. I think the trade deadline is, I want to say it's the Friday after the Seattle game before the Vancouver game. So
I think it's the 6th.
Oh, I thought it was the 8th.
Oh,
whatever.
You may be right.
I think it's the Friday in NHL 26, but I could be wrong about this. Anyways, point being, it's while we're at West. How do we think we do in those 6 games? Do you think we can get at least 8 points out of that stretch? And do we think that, most importantly, we can beat Detroit, we can beat the Leafs, we can come out of the Olympic break strong, and we can really sort of put the pressure on, both the pressure on the teams above us, but I think in some ways more importantly, put the pressure on Steos that like we're here. Let's put the pedal down.
Yeah. So obviously those 6 games have taken a whole other level of importance with how the Sens have clawed back into the race, and obviously with those games preceding the trade deadline. But you absolutely need to win those 2 games after the break. That's not up for discussion. You need to beat the Detroit Red Wings like you've shown you can do quite easily. They've dominated every game against them this year. They've just needed a couple saves, so you need that win. You need that win against Toronto. And I think a lot of the decisions, relating to the trade deadline strategy will be made after that duo of games heading into the road trip. Yeah, I think the Sens get 8 out of 12 points. If that's the question, I think that's quite realistic. You can drop one out west, but you beat. I think Seattle's a tougher matchup than people think. But yeah, 8 out of 12 points is entirely feasible. On a longer term view, the Sens, I think, have the ninth hardest schedule. When you look at average winning percentage from here on out. Um, it used to be first or second, so they've played a lot of the harder games already, Colorado, Vegas, Carolina. Um, the encouraging thing, though, is the Boston Bruins now are first in terms of hardest schedule remaining. So that is a little bit of hope. I think if the Sens can close the gap to, I want to say 4 points before the trade deadline, the moves we just discussed will be ever closer to reality.
That is a very good optimistic note. Win the two, get 6 points out, 6 points out of 8. Maybe lose to. Yeah, I mean, I cheer for Seattle. I don't cheer for them, but I am vaguely pro Seattle because I like Joey Decord and I like Jordan Eberle. So they've they have a fun like Island of Misfit Toys roster that I think is interesting. But yeah, I mean that road trip's not good. Like, especially with the Oilers. They're like, I think the Oilers will be fine in the playoffs. I think this is a team that fully does not care about the regular season. And I think when McDavid and Draisaitl lock in, they'll be, they'll probably make the Western. They'll probably make the Western Finals and probably lose to whichever of Colorado and Dallas makes it out of the gauntlet that is Central. But like, I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the Sens. Is there as many reasons to be optimistic about Team Canada?
Well, I think there are more reasons. The Team Canada has obviously the highest ranked team, in my opinion. When you look at the way it was constructed, wins above replacement, I think they have the best set of players. However, that is more of a testament to the top end talent they have and whether that top end talent can compensate for some of their weaknesses, which are obvious, right? I'm obviously everyone's remarked upon the state of goaltending in Canada, which is quite poor. We don't even know who our starter is going to be against Czechia on Thursday, or at least I don't. I think I know who I would name as the starter, but it's not like it's that obvious. Our defense has some weakness too. I think Colton Parayko is going to be playing, in the top four, and as defensively reliable as Parayko is, he's a slow player, and I wonder how his game translates to the Olympics. We saw last year how that lack of speed was a bit of a problem. Um, yeah, I think the so much hinges on whether MacKinnon and McDavid can carry this team. But those are 2 players that, and even McCarr too. Those are 3 players that are not matched by any other team. So that's the obvious, analysis around Team Canada. Um, Evan, what do you think? Because like when I look at the US roster, it looks deeper. It looks, I think, more talented. I think on the whole, but I think the clutch factor comes in, and Canada gets the win, gets gold.
So I am not that up in the air about who I think is going to be the goaltender. I think Bennington did enough in the Four Nations final that he starts the tournament in net for us. And if that doesn't work, then we have a conversation about other options. But I think Bennington, I mean, that overtime against the Americans last year, like I'm never going to. It's so hard for me to now slander Bennington the way I usually used to because it's just like, he did it. And whether or not that's a fluke, whether that's a statistical anomaly, whether or not we just need to all, shut up about it, it was an extremely impressive performance. And I think that has earned him the trust of the decision making brass at Hockey Canada. The thing about this team, and the thing that I think people misunderstand about international competition, not just in hockey, I think about this in soccer, is like the strength of the 22-man roster, 23-man roster, whatever the hell it is not actually what I care about, right? I care about what the people who are going to play are, and more importantly, I care about the ability of the guys who are going to play a lot of minutes. McDavid is probably going to play 28 minutes in a gold medal game if we get there, like Crosby, MacKinnon, like we are going to be able to double shift guys. We're going to be able to elongate stretches. We're going to be able to use our top guys. And look, is that a potential risk for the Oilers and for the, for the Avalanche, right? Sure. You know who doesn't care about that right now? John Cooper, right? The coaching staff doesn't give a shit if that's going to make Makar and MacKinnon more tired for the Avalanche in April. They want to win. They want to win gold for their country. We are the two-time defending, gold medalists in years that we actually sent the pros, which I don't, 2018 and 2022, they're Mickey Mouse trophies. They're Mickey Mouse medals. We are the two-time defending champ. We're coming for this, and we're going to take it back. And I ain't that worried about the goaltending because at the end of the day, the one advantage, and I think the key reason why I'm not that worried about Parayko, if this were on international ice, I'd be having a meltdown about Parayko, but, the ice is smaller a little bit. That'll help. I think we're fine. I think we're good. I think we clearly made less. Look, would Evan Bouchard be on my team? Absolutely. But we made a lot less mistakes than Bill Guerin did for the Americans. So,
So on goaltending, I actually disagree. Look, Bennington was above and beyond in that overtime, but I think he generally had an okay tournament in terms of goals he should have saved. He is the worst goalie statistically in the NHL this year. He's got an 864 save percentage. So the only reason you would start with him, and you can't really make a mistake, like you got to win that game against Czechia. Like you don't want to end up playing the States in the quarterfinals, right? Thompson, inversely, has been one of the better goalies over the last two seasons. And if there's one position where recency matters, that is it. I'll be very curious. Like I don't think there's an obvious decision, but there's a strong case to be made for Logan Thompson. And I think you add into the fact that he's a lefty. That tends to screw with players' minds a little bit. No, but no, I think it's generally it's just a shame that Team Canada's Olympic hockey team, men's Olympic hockey team, has an 864 goalie potentially starting in game one of the 2026 Olympics, Evan.
Oh yeah, no, it's unacceptable. Like you and I grew up in the era of Brodeur, Luongo, and Carey Price, and we are now look, I would start Luka Thompson. Like I would. Not even a conversation. Like, to me, if it were me, it's not even a conversation. I just think they will start Binnington, and I think that
Right.
it will be a mistake.
Okay,
But
I misunderstood you.
no, I think they will. I don't think they should. I think they will.
Right.
But like, yeah, no, it's a far cry from the state of hockey in this, like, of goaltending that, again, both of us grew up with, right? Like, this is horrifying. How is this the best how is this the best that we've done?
Yeah, it's a shame.
It's not good
Brodeur,
when I'd be crying out for like Joe Wool or like that level of like not even positive you're like a starter. You should be like a bona fide starter in the NHL. And I'd feel a lot better if he was just like, if that level of goalie was Canadian. What are we doing?
but yeah, it comes back to what we stated off the hop, which is an obvious fact about this team. We can make up for it, and we did it last year. I want to go into, because we saw there was some news coming out of the first practice. The second was closed to media, probably because of all the overreaction to that news out of the first practice, and that was the way the lines were constructed, Evan. Um, so I think Cooper put everything into a blender, and I think that was the first iteration of the lines, and they probably won't be the same come Thursday. But um, for the listeners out there, I know we like to fantasize about, well, we like to line up the forwards and the defensemen in a certain way when you have a fantasy-like team. Um, I actually wanted to get your thoughts on this too, Evan. I think it's intriguing. I think it might work out, this McDavid and Wilson combination. The thing with McDavid is he doesn't necessarily need the very best players on his wings to play at his full potential, and that allows you to distribute the talent down the lineup. He mainly needs, the Zach Hyman type, the facilitators who can keep the play moving in the offensive zone, play physically, and finish the chances that he's creating. So I agree with Cooper's instinct on that. But here's how I would go about it. I think he had Celebrini with them. Um, Reinhardt, in my opinion, is the best shooter, the best finisher on this lineup. And he played with McDavid last year. So I say you play Wilson and Reinhardt on McDavid's wings. I think Celebrini, Crosby, and MacKinnon is probably the smartest line it is possible to assemble. Perhaps in hockey, but definitely with Team Canada. The chemistry between, Crosby and MacKinnon is obvious. And Celebrini is one of those rare players with a hockey IQ high enough to add value to that trio, in my opinion. He brings the speed and the thinking and then the offensive zone play that somehow elevates MacKinnon and Crosby. And I think that line could be one of the most productive in the tournament. And that's been one of the most, I don't know, discussed trios in the lead up to the Olympics. So that's how I would line up the top six. I'll stop there and get your thoughts before I go any further, Evan.
I am fine with celebrating on the first line tentatively, just because I think McDavid. We know that Reinhardt works, so let's try something else. Let's give it a shot, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe we need to go back to what we had. But the existence of the Four Nations face-off, I think, gives us an opportunity to try some things, see, and maybe we don't try it against Czechia, who are actually good. Like, I actually think are a threat, but I do think we need to bank some of the chemistry that we know that we have from last year's team and try some other combinations. I love Tom Wilson on McDavid's line. That is a very interesting, very considered approach. And I think Tom Wilson isn't quite as much a facilitator as Hyman is, but having somebody as sort of purely, Celebrini is a very good shooter, not a Reinhardt level shooter, obviously, but he is a very good shooter. And I think having that sort of Celebrini really is like Nuge, but just way, way, way better. He's the richest version of a Nuge sort of archetype of player. And I think it's at least worth trying because at the end of the day, I think Celebrini, Crosby, MacKinnon is like such a good line. It doesn't like we know that line's gonna work. All three of those guys could play fucking blindfolded and they would be incredible. They would know where each other are. They're again that hockey IQ is off the charts. I almost think on some level we don't need to try that one because I think we know we have that in the bag because it just will work. And again, we know Sid and Nate have such incredible chemistry that those. Yes, we only saw it, at Four Nations, but like those two can fucking go. Those guys have probably skated together more often in practice and training sessions. Like those two know exactly where they are, and I think you can mess around with it. I'm sure someone would be offended by the non-existence of Mitch Marner on a top two lines. However, I think Mitch Marner is the perfect winger on a defensive checking line.
Exactly.
And I think part of the thing about Marner, part of the reason why Marner discourse was like completely cursed in Toronto was people who didn't like him didn't want to think of it. He doesn't look like an incredibly great defensive player. He doesn't fit the mold of what you should think of. On Team Canada, I hate Marner. I think fuck the Leafs forever and always, right? Marner is an incredible third line checking winger.
Yes.
I don't even think it's a question, and I think he will get far more minutes than a third liner would because I assume he's on PK1.
Yeah.
He was the only good thing about the Leafs penalty kill for years. Like, God, that's why I think of it. It's just like, I think you've got a lot of options, and I think you're entirely correct about the fact that McDavid does not need the best players around him. And look, if we're chasing a goal with 8 minutes to go, yeah, we can chuck, Sid, Connor and Nate on a line together
as
for
they
sure.
did last year. They loaded up a few times.
Right.
Yeah.
But we've got it. Like I think that top six is I think there is versatility in it, and I think there is a virtue and a value to trying stuff. And I think people are wildly overreacting because I think we know what works, right? We see this in I think about international soccer a lot, right? Like, fans always freak out about the first game of the World Cup or the Euros or whatever. And it's like, okay, but part of this is like, these guys have played together a few times. We know what works. We can try other stuff to see if other stuff works better. Yeah. But like, we know we've got Reinhardt and McDavid. Like, we know they have chemistry. We know that combo works. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable to try. I don't think it's unreasonable to try something sort of different.
Yeah. There will be many permutations here, of course, but I just mean, what is the best? What's the most you can get out of this lineup with, the ideal lines, right? And you read my mind there with Marner. Like I think Stone, Suzuki, and Marner is the prototypical shutdown line. Like that's three of the team's best defensive players on one trio. And they're so good offensively that they'll also defend by controlling the possession. The drawback on that is that you get three right-handed shots and a slight lack of speed. And then the other one I jotted down here was Hagel, Horvat, Marchand, which is the chaos line, the intensity line. They won't play much, but they'll wear down the opposition. So that's how I constructed in my head, and I think that that's how you get the most out of this roster. But yeah, I mean, there will be different permutations in game, between games, and I think there aren't really any wrong decisions. I mean, there are, but
well,
not.
I'm sure I'm sure I think on defense, there's a lot more room to make bad decisions. Right? You could, you know, I'm not. I think the forward line's kind of. I like your combo, and I hope that we see that exact combo at some point. What do we do with this defense?
Yeah, so again, I have, serious concerns about goaltending. I also have concerns about the defense. While it's obviously one of the better defenses in the world, I don't think it's better than the United States. Makar and Taves is untouchable. They are probably the best pairing in the world, but it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because I alluded to Pareko. He's going to have to play elevated minutes because of the lack of right-handed shots on Team Canada. It seems he's going to play with Morrissey. I'm generally okay with that pairing, but I'm just worried about Pareko's usage. He's going to be playing penalty kill minutes, obviously, and while I understand it's not an Olympic sized rink, Evan, it is a much faster game, and I think Pareko was exposed in that respect last year at the Four Nations. And then the third pair, yeah, I mean, you have what is it, Sanheim and Theodore. So you got one of the two playing their offside. It's just not ideal. And then you think about how the U.S. is lining up their defense. McAvoy and Hughes, Slavin and Faber, and I think Sanderson's with Werenski on the third pair. I think that gives the US the edge. It makes me a little bit nervous that Team Canada defense when I'm comparing to the US in particular.
Yeah, no, the Americans absolutely have the edge defensively. I think the Americans are gonna have to play a very. They're just gonna have to hold the puck a ton because I don't love their forwards, which we can get into in a minute. But like, I do think that defense is just going to control possession, and I think we are going to need our forwards to be very possession hungry. I think we're going to need to be very, very smart with our decision making, and I certainly think when you get into those, when you get to the bottom two lines, especially if they're constructed anything like how you've constructed them, it's going to take a very real and concerted effort to not turn the puck over. We are going to need to cut down on mistakes because at the end of the day, I do worry that once the Americans get the puck, they're not going to be giving it up very often. Jake Sanderson on a third pair is outrageous. Zach Werenski on a third pair is also outrageous. Like, it is ever so slightly horrifying how good their defense is. Obviously, assuming the Canada and the U.S. will face each other at some point, we will for sure do a full game preview of that and review what has happened in the tournament up till then. The American forwards. Let's just do this quickly. Then, what was Bill Guerin smoking? Why is he trying to build a hockey team for the 1998 Nagano Olympics?
Well, leaving Jason Robertson off the team is an egregious mistake. But it does speak to the depth that they have. I'm going to ask you this question, Evan. So I assume you have Robertson on the team, and that's the principal mistake. Who do you take off though?
JT Miller.
Yeah, but then that's easy to say, but he's like probably the 12th or 13th forward on that team, right?
At the end of the day, I think this idea that these players can't like play down in lineups, I think it's just nonsensical. Take the guys who can score. It's the Americans.
The way Team Canada was built, certainly. Like
and I'd have Evan Bouchard on this team too.
We need those role players who are going to make the most out of the little minutes they get, and they have a specific task, and they're going to execute it to perfection. I actually think that's a good philosophy when thinking about roster construction for the Olympics. That being said, Evan JT Miller is having a very poor season. He's a bit of a bonehead too, and is not a great choice. But yeah, I think that team is very deep on the left side too. When you think about Brady Tkachuk and others as well. So I'm blanking on names here, but Was there a spot for Robertson? Yes, but the question is where do you play him? The same could be said about Cole Caulfield as well, who's got 30 plus goals. It becomes a matter of what chair or what role does that player fill, and they ran out of roles.
Who do you who would you start if you're the American coach in net? Hellebuck's been injured this year. I don't know how much I like. I mean, he's back healthy, but I don't know how much I'm trusting him. I assume I would go Ottinger, but
I'm going if I'm the American coach, I'm going Jeremy Swayman.
really,
I'm using the same logic that I applied to the exercise we did around Canada. I think recency matters when it comes to goaltending. Jeremy Swayman has been the best American goaltender by a long shot this year. When you dive into the metrics, he's one of the main reasons that the Boston Bruins are in the playoffs right now. Hellebuck has been very underwhelming, and obviously they'll both get games because I think they play a back to back. But I think Jeremy Swayman is who I play. Well, it will be Hellebuck. Like Hellebuck will get the start, but I think Jeremy Swayman's the better goalie at this point. And he might actually get into the medal rounds.
so I guess the question with Swayman was last year the aberration. He had the contract holdout, and then he didn't technically miss any games of the holdout, but he missed all of camp and he just never got back to himself. I guess if you want to view that as aberrational, and this year is sort of what he should be, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's gonna be Hellebuck. I don't think it should be Hellebuck. I think the Americans are you know probably more wedded to a dumb idea in that than we are, which hopefully. But I don't think it should be. Let's just put it this way: I hope it's still Hellebuck by the time we get there, because I have more faith that we can beat him than
That's
I
the
do
thing.
in either Swayman or Andre. Like I honestly would have Hellebuck third in my rotation if I were the American coach.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of Bennington, right? The inability to win in big moments, whether it's the NHL playoffs or international tournaments.
Yeah, at least with Bennington, you can squint and make like a clutch elevates his game when the moment's highest argument, that I will roll my eyes at, but you can at least squint and make it. Much harder to do for Hellebuck. Um, who scares you outside of the big two? Do you worried about you worried about Sweden as an actual contender, or is it more so like they're in the road for bronze, but they're race for bronze, but they're not really that real of contenders.
Yeah, so if we're going about it in tiers, I think Canada and US belong in their own tier, and Sweden belongs in the next tier, and they're probably alone. They got a lot of talent, and if anyone's going to upset, Canada and the US, it will be them. You could have made a case for Finland, but without Barkov, that's going to be difficult. I think Czechia, you could have made a half credible case, but then they lost Zaka and Hedel, so they've got no center depth. Yeah, I think Sweden's the only team really that has a realistic chance of doing that. But what a story that would be, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no. I think Czechia is an interesting one. They've certainly been very good at the youth levels. I think they're one cycle away from probably getting into medal contention. I'm obviously going to stump. I can't believe I'm the one who has to stump for Team Germany in this. Dreisaitl, Mo Seider, Tim Stützle. Unfortunately, it is a pretty steep drop off after those three. And then, I mean, do we want to stump for Team Finland? Like they're just kind of not they're kind of good, not great. Like
Yeah. Well, the
I
thing
sort
about
of
Finland
Finland's
is,
is kind of seemingly between generations. Like Lundell's fine, but like he's one like they just haven't produced like that many true young talents in the last few years. Since Brandon, obviously, who I no longer qualify as a young talent, but you know, it's just Finland's a weird one. I think Sweden's defense. It's pretty old. Like it's good names, but it's like Dahlin's obviously the best one there, but it's like Hedman, Carlson, Oliver Ekman Larson.
so I don't think Ekman Larsson's gonna make it on the starting six, and this is why like I have my doubts about Canada's defense. I actually think Sweden's defense matches, at least in terms of talent. We'll see how it shakes out, but it's Forsling and Dahlin, Hedman and Anderson, Broberg and Carlson. Like that's very, very solid, and you've got an equal.
Broberg is that's a choice. That is a like I don't I think Broberg is just gonna get eaten alive.
Maybe, but that's your third, and that's your left shot defenseman on your third pair. No, I think that defense is really solid, and the teams, Evan, that you think can cause a bit of surprise, and that just means, I don't know, maybe exceeding to the quarterfinals or the semifinals. Who are those dark horse teams in your opinion that you think could make it there?
I mean, I'm going to be myself. I am gonna say that I think there's a very real chance that we get, depending on how it breaks, that we get Germany in a semifinal potentially. Like
Yeah.
I will legit stump for them in this because I think it's very dependent on whether you care about high end quality in something like this. And I think Draisaitl and Stützle and Mosader are going to play 35 minutes a game. Like in a quarterfinal, I think they're just going to play that much.
Hopefully not.
And well, hopefully not for our Sens fandom, but like I do think that high end quality matters. And I'm going to take the high end quality over the better depth quality. I think the Czechs, I'm almost worried that everyone is sort of buying into like Czechia as a real sort of dark horse contender. I mean, does anyone want to make like
I can make a case for Switzerland. I mean, I think
okay.
in addition to Germany, I think Switzerland can Switzerland has enough talent there that they can qualify for the quarterfinals. They won't be one of the top four, obviously, but Fiala, Hischier, Niederreiter, Suter, Timo Meyer, like there's a couple names, Roman Yossi, Siegenthaler, Moser, like there's a lot of NHL talent, and they've got a decent goalie too. They've got Akira Schmid out of Vegas, so they're a deeper team than Germany. They're lacking the top end talent, but that's an interesting team that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. Like they'll give everyone a run for their money, in my opinion.
No, that's a good point. I did not quite realize the depth of NHL talent on that team. What's your bold prediction? Give me something off the top of your head. I'm going Germany semifinals. What's yours? Does anybody beat the Americans? Finland out in the group stage. Give me something. Give me something hot and spicy.
Geez, you've got me, Evan. I think Sweden makes it to the final.
Ooh, that's a bold call. Now that could mean two things. That could mean they beat one of Canada and America.
I'm not elaborating, Evan.
No, I'm not saying you have to for the sake of this, but I just want to make clear there are two ways that you can be correct in this. One one, somebody falters in the group stage, and Canada and the U.S. end up in the semis against each other, or Sweden beats one of Canada and the U.S. I think the first is probably how you're going to have to win this if you're going to. So what? William Nylander tournament and MVP is what you're saying?
Yeah, but the Raymonds, the Forsbergs, the Petterssons. You just talked about Pettersson. There's again a lot of top tier talent on that team. Dahlin, in my opinion, is a top three defenseman in the NHL, and they've got a great goalie in former Sen Philip Gustafsson.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, as long as they're not stupid enough to try the Jacob Markstrom thing, they like.
Well, obviously not. The Devils aren't trying the Jacob Markstrom thing.
Look. I'm just saying, like that. I just worry that all these teams are going to be stupid and just go with the old guys. Like that is my grave concern as a sports fan, that we're just going to be like, oh, but they're experienced. We need the experience, and it's like, again, I hope I'm wrong about Bennington. I don't want that man within 50 feet of our net at any point in this tournament, but I'm worried because we do stupid things. What has not been a stupid thing is having Liam MacKinnon on the Scrimshaw Show. Thanks so much for doing this, buddy.
Evan, it's been a blast, and I look forward to our next conversation about the interesting world of hockey.
Hopefully next week. I will have a politics Scrimshaw show later this week. What's the Jays? What's the quick Jays take? We optimistic? We winning the AL East? Worried about things not breaking our way towards the end there of free agency?
Yeah, so I think a lot hinges on how much regression we'll see from the likes of Springer and Clement, namely. We now have a very solid rotation with the addition of Dylan Cease. Cody Ponce is a good depth add as well. I think the Jays haven't played their last cards. I think this offseason they've got quite a glut in terms of starting pitching. That you can name like 6 or 7 players who have started games last year for the Jays. So yeah, I think pretty confident because they've really insulated the pitching, and I think they've if you're expecting Gosman to regress a little bit, if you think Bieber's going to be hurt, well, it makes the Dylan Cease signing quite logical. Now, offensively, you're banking on Anthony Santander returning to form. I'm really glad they didn't go after Kyle Tucker at that price, and I'm glad they're not playing, Bo Bichette at third base and paying him that much. So, no, I think the Jays are still the favorites for the AL East, and it'll be an exciting season. They're not rolling back the same roster, Evan, but they're rolling back the same strategy. Positional versatility, platoons, playing. They're going to be better than the sum of their parts is essentially the story about the Jays, and so I'm quite confident that there's still a better team than all the other teams in the AL East, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, and I mean the Yankees have gone sideways at best. The Red Sox still have not made that sort of big. They got worse. I'm fairly optimistic about the team. I mean, I'm just gonna say these words out loud. One of Shane Bieber and Trey Savage is our 4th starter. It's hard not to be optimistic about a team when that's the truth. And at the end of the day, yeah, Springer's almost assuredly not going to be as good next year as he was this year. But we've got I don't want to say a glut of bats, but like we have enough players that we can rest him. Like he doesn't need to play 160 games. He can start as DH in 120. He can, we don't have to play him through an iffy shoulder or whatever the hell. Barger and Clement were obviously incredible in the playoff run. It's not like their regular seasons were wildly super impressive. So it's not like we're expecting regular season regression from them per se. And, Santander can't be worse than he was. He can't give us less than he did. And to be, like optimistic, Loperfido, if he gives us anything, that's a very valuable, that is somebody that there was a lot of expectation of, and there is clearly a lot of reason to think is valuable. And, I think we have the right combination of youth and experience that, yeah, obviously Springer, you have to bank in that he's 80% of the player he was last year. And look, and if he wants to be the same player, he wants to be 95% of the same player, great, fantastic, exceed my expectations, like overperform my expectations, exceed them. I'm incredibly optimistic about this team. And I love the fact that I care about baseball. I'm genuinely thrilled.
Yeah, one name also you didn't mention was Okamoto, who is probably going to eat into Loperfido's playing time in terms of the, fringe starters slash super utility players. So yeah, this is the thing with the Jays is they are so friggin' deep, and that is going to take them a long way. There's a lot of insurance for injuries, and they're going to be a really exciting team to watch again this year. And I'm just glad Rogers has decided to, finally consistently be in the top 3 or top 5 teams as far as payroll is concerned, year in, year out. So, yeah, very excited to not only watch the Jays from home, but also at the Rogers Stadium this year.
We gotta hit a game or two this we gotta hit some games this summer, man. Liam MacKinnon, thank you so much for coming on the Scrum Show. Liam J. MacKinnon on Twitter. G MacKinnon, not J MacKinnon. Jesus Christ.
That's right. That's right.
You'll be tagged. You'll be tagged in the tweet. Scrimshunscripted.substack.com for all my political writing. Probably might write a couple of hockey pieces about the Olympics too, because I've got the takes. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. Not that I ever post on Blue Sky, but I need to try and remember to post my columns over there at the very least. At East Scrimshaw. Hang out. I write columns. I endorsed Naderson Smith for Ontario Liberal Leader today, or Tuesday. I was recording this yesterday as people are listening to this. So that's either going to get people loving it or hating me for it. I will check my replies in a minute, but thanks so much for coming on, man.
Be well, my friend. See you next time.
See ya.